In previous video, we have learned about all the components of environment and organisms. Also, we have learned about organisms and their population. I have shared video in which most of the content was covered. The remaining part of this chapter we are going to cover now in this video. Just look at the video now.
When you look at this tree, that are capable of maintaining homeostasis by physiological or behavioral means are called regulators. The mechanism by which organisms regulate their constant body temperature, irrespective of the external temperature, is called thermoregulation. Similarly, the mechanism by which organisms regulate a constant osmotic concentration, irrespective of the external osmotic concentration, is called osmoregulation. A few lower invertebrates and vertebrate species, along with birds and mammals, are capable of regulation. For instance, human beings are capable of regulating their body temperature and maintaining it at 37 degrees Celsius. For example, in summer, when the external temperature is more than our body temperature, we perspire a lot. This results in evaporative cooling, which lowers our body temperature. Likewise, in winter, when the external temperature is much lower than our body temperature, we shiver. Shivering generates heat and raises our body temperature. Such a mechanism is seen in mammals, but is absent in plants. Evolutionary biologists believe that the success of mammals is greatly due to their ability to maintain a constant body temperature, which enables them to survive in extreme climates. Some organisms that are unable to regulate their internal environment may partially regulate their internal environment or conform to external conditions. These organisms are known as conformers. Studies show that almost 99% of animals and nearly all plants belong to this category. The body temperature of such organisms changes according to the ambient temperature. Similarly, in the case of aquatic organisms, their osmotic concentration changes according to the ambient water osmotic concentration. Although maintaining a constant internal environment has advantages, conformers did not evolve into regulators. The reason is that processes like thermoregulation and osmoregulation consume a lot of energy, particularly in small animals, where heat loss or heat gain is a function of the surface area. Such animals have a larger surface area compared to their volume, and so they tend to lose their body heat very quickly when the outside temperature is low. Moreover, they consume a lot of energy to generate body heat, and this is why you rarely find small animals in the polar regions. Interestingly, during the course of evolution, the costs and benefits of maintaining a constant internal environment were taken into consideration, and thus some organisms have evolved to become regulators, while others have remained conformers. Sometimes, stressful external conditions may be localized or have a short duration. In such situations, organisms may migrate, hibernate, estivate, or suspend to survive. Particularly during winter, you may have read about or witnessed the arrival of migratory birds such as the greater flamingo, Siberian cranes, and northern shoveler from Siberia and other cold northern regions to the famous Keoladio National Park in Bharatpur in Rajasthan. Similarly, in Europe too, people staying high up in the Alps come down to the valleys during winter. Migration is seen in animals that are capable of moving from stressful environmental conditions to a place that offers a favorable climate. But what about animals that are unable to migrate? Such animals are likely to cope with the unfavorable conditions by undergoing hibernation during winter to preserve energy and estivation in summer to avoid heat-related problems and desiccation. Interestingly, many zooplanktons in lakes and ponds are known to enter diapause, a state of suspended development during unfavorable conditions. Although these mechanisms are seen in animals, plants too show various responses to stressful external conditions. They usually suspend themselves in unfavorable conditions. In the case of bacteria, fungi, and lower plants, thick-walled spores are produced, which help them survive in unfavorable conditions and germinate in favorable conditions. Similarly, in higher plants, seeds and other vegetative reproductive structures are produced, which help overcome stressful periods besides helping in dispersal. This is done by reducing their metabolic activity and undergoing a dormancy period. In favorable conditions, these seeds and vegetative reproductive structures germinate to form new plants. In this way, we see that to respond to stressful abiotic conditions, various organisms regulate, conform, migrate, hibernate, estivate, or suspend themselves. While some animals thrive in polar regions. Plants in the tropical rainforests have drip tips and thick waxy surfaces that allow water to run off, while desert plants have spongy stems which store water and leaves reduced to tiny pointed spines. On our planet, every organism adapts to stressful environmental conditions through morphological, physiological, and behavioral means. In fact, the responses of these organisms are their adaptations to cope in unfavorable or stressful conditions. In other words, adaptation is any attribute of the organism that enables it to survive and reproduce in its habitat. Let's look at some of the morphological adaptations exhibited by organisms. Over the course of evolution, many adaptations have evolved and have been genetically fixed. Although life originated in water and is unable to sustain without it, some organisms can survive without water for days. In the case of the kangaroo rat in the North American deserts, the animal meets its water requirements by metabolic water. Metabolic water is released as a byproduct during oxidation of fat in its body. The body of this rodent is also capable of concentrating its urine so that very little water is used to remove waste products. Likewise, the camel can also survive without water for 10 days at a stretch and is capable of raising its body temperature to nearly 42 degrees Celsius to prevent the loss of water. Similarly, many desert plants have a thick layer of cuticle on their leaves with their stomata embedded in deep pits to reduce the loss of water through transpiration. These plants have also adopted a special photosynthetic pathway called CAM, or crassulacean acid metabolism, which enables their stomata to remain closed during the day. Some desert plants, like the opuntia, have leaves that are reduced to spines, and its flattened spongy stems perform photosynthesis. While some plants and animals have adapted to prevent the loss of water, some animals, particularly those found in colder regions, have adapted themselves to prevent the loss of heat. For instance, mammals from colder climates generally have shorter tails, limbs, and ears, which help reduce loss of heat. This adaptation is called Allen's rule. Moreover, in the polar seas, aquatic mammals such as seals, whales, and dolphins have a thick layer of fat known as blubber below their skin, which acts as an insulator and minimizes the loss of body heat. Apart from morphological adaptations, some organisms physiologically adapt themselves to respond to stressful situations. For example, as you ascend a mountain, atmospheric pressure and oxygen decrease, and you begin to experience altitude sickness. Its symptoms are fatigue, nausea, and palpitations. But in 2 to 3 days, your body gets acclimatized to such stressful conditions, after which you don't experience altitude sickness. This is because your body has increased the production of red blood cells, decreased the binding capacity of hemoglobin, and increased your rate of breathing to compensate for low levels of atmospheric oxygen. This also explains why tribes living in high altitudes have higher hemoglobin than those dwelling in the plains. While some organisms adapt themselves to live in high altitudes, a variety of marine invertebrates such as jellyfish, octopus, starfish, and fish such as the anglerfish and lanternfish thrive in deep ocean waters, where the pressure could be 100 times more than the normal atmospheric pressure. Such organisms show a fascinating array of biochemical adaptations to survive in such extreme conditions. Another interesting adaptation is by organisms found in harsh habitats, such as deep-sea hydrothermal vents and hot springs, where temperatures exceed 100 degrees Celsius. Here, microbes belonging to the archaebacteria form flourish. While some organisms thrive in temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, other organisms flourish in the Arctic and Antarctic waters, where temperatures are always below zero. Apart from physiological and morphological adaptations, some organisms also show behavioral adaptations to cope with their changing environment. example, the desert lizard manages to keep its body temperature fairly constant by absorbing heat while lying in the sun when its body temperature is below normal. But when the ambient temperature is high, it moves into the shade. Likewise, some organisms such as earthworms, frogs, moles, and snakes burrow into the soil to escape the above-ground heat. Therefore, these animals are rarely seen on the ground in scorching summers. In this way, to adapt to unfavorable conditions, organisms have undergone morphological, physiological, and behavioral changes. An individual never lives in isolation. It prefers to stay in association with other species or individuals of its own kind. Such a group of individuals belonging to the same species living in a given geographical area that share or compete for similar resources and interbreed only among themselves is known as population. For instance, in this forest, apart from this tribe, you will find an elephant, deer, and tiger population. Although such populations interbreed or sexually reproduce, some groups of individuals that asexually reproduce, such as bacteria and fungi, also constitute a population. Populations of various organisms tend to cope with the changing environment for their survival. Evolutionary changes through natural selection take place at the population level, and so population ecology is an important field of ecology. Interestingly, a population has certain characteristics or attributes such as birth and death rates, sex ratio, age distribution, and population density, which are statistically measured. However, these attributes cannot be calculated for individual organisms. Birth and death rates are expressed in terms of per capita. That is, by dividing the total number of births or deaths by the total population that exists in a given time period. For example, in a wetland, there were 100 typha plants last year, and 60 new plants are added, taking the current population to 160. The birth rate is measured by dividing the total number of births by the total population, which is 60 divided by 100, or 0.6 offspring per typha per year. To understand death rate, consider a lake with a population of 25 fish, where 5 fish die a week. The death rate is calculated by dividing the total number of deaths by the total population in the fish population in a week, which is 5 divided by 25, or 0.5 fish per week. Apart from birth and death rates, another important attribute of a population is sex ratio. For example, in this tribe, 40% of the population are females and 60% are males. Moreover, at any point in time, this population consists of individuals who may belong to pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive age groups. A graphical representation of the various age groups is known as the age pyramid. In the human population, the age pyramid shows the age distribution of males and females in the same diagram. In fact, The shape of the age pyramid reflects the growth status of the population and indicates whether the population is growing, stable, or declining. Another important population attribute is the size of the population, or the population density, denoted by the letter N, which provides details of its status in its habitat. The size of the population is usually taken into consideration for studies on ecological processes in the population, such as the effect of pesticides or pollution, impact of predators or competitors with other species. Moreover, a habitat may consist of several populations of different sizes. In this wetland, for instance, there are only 10 kingfisher birds, hundreds of cutla fish, thousands of typha plants, and millions of chlamydomonas. Although the total number of individuals of a species provides the most appropriate measure of its population density, in some cases, measuring population density in terms of numbers is either meaningless or difficult to determine. For instance, if there are 200 Parthenium plants growing under a single huge banyan tree, it would be incorrect to say that the population density of banyan tree is very low compared to the Parthenium plants. In such a case, the biomass density, or the biomass per unit area or volume of the banyan tree, provides a meaningful measure of the population size. Thus, population density can be a biomass density or a numerical density. Sometimes, estimating the total number of individuals in the population may not be possible, as the size may be huge or counting may take a lot of time. Think of the effort and number of hours you would require to count the number of fish in a lake. Under such circumstances, measuring relative density will serve its purpose. That is, the number of fish caught per trap provides a good measure of its total population density in the lake. In some cases, the population size of certain individuals is assessed without seeing or counting them. For example, the tiger census in our national parks and tiger reserves is often done based on pug marks and fecal pellets. Thus, population attributes provide important information about the organisms in a particular habitat, and they provide the basis for further ecological studies and research.
This is all for this video. Remaining part of this video we will learn, remaining part of this chapter we will learn in next video.